Hello and welcome to Stories That Connect Us. This is sponsored by NJAGC, New Jersey Association for Gifted Children. Welcome. I'm Mary Rufo. I am the co-VP for membership for NJAGC. And Stories That Connect Us is an opportunity for you, our guests, to be able to meet and get to know individuals that have a connection to gifted education. Some of our guests that you'll be meeting are people that you may know very well. You may be familiar with their names. And sometimes you may be meeting individuals that you may not have ever heard of before. But no matter what, we're so excited and enthusiastic to be able to give to you an individual that is part of Stories That Connect Us, that will be sharing their story, the human side of themselves, letting you know a bit more about who they are and allowing you to make a deeper connection with them. So with that being said, here's the question for tonight. What does gym class, Judge Judy, education law advocate, and being a published author all have in common? Take a minute and think about that. Gym class, Judge Judy, educational law advocate, and a published author. All of those items have to do with our guest this evening, Mr. Aidan Allman Cooper. Aidan, welcome to Stories That Connect Us. How you doing?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Mary. What an honor this is.
We are so honored to have you, Aidan. And, you and I have had the opportunity to be able to talk already and to get to know one another. And your story is one that I am so honored to be able to share with everybody. Your story is inspiring and remarkable and amazing, all of those things at once. So I think that our audience is going to walk away after hearing you and really feel inspired by what it is that you have to say. To our guest, Aidan is autistic, and he is here to share his story from the beginning. And we're going to start from the very beginning, way back in elementary school. And one of the first things that I'd like us to get to hear from Aidan about is the way that he viewed public education as an elementary student. One of his quotes that he shared with me was, "I believe in public school. I believe in education." So Aidan, if you could, let's go back to your early years in elementary school, let's say second grade. Let's start there. Tell our audience a little bit about what it was that you saw, what you felt, what inspired you, what motivated you as a young student in school.
Well, I'm so glad that you brought this up, because I really think that this part of my story may especially resonate with the audience who may be educators within the elementary school population. I say that because my story a lot of times is similar to some children that you may have educated or you may know of or think it possibly could have been in some form. For me, what it has been was I was a second grader and a first grader and a kindergartner, and I was preschool even. And right off the bat, I knew, and I didn't know at the time, but I knew that I later found out that I was quite a handful. I mean, let me tell you, I really drove my teachers a little bit crazy. I had a lot, I was needy. I had a lot of needs, a lot of anxiety, never any behavioral issues, but I was I was a bit of a handful, a bit of a piece of work to deal with. But what I will tell you is that when I was born specifically, I didn't reach certain developmental milestones. Certain things weren't quite met. Things appeared to be a little bit atypical. my development. And so they diagnosed me with PGD-NOS, which stands for pervasive developmental delay not otherwise specified. That's a very general diagnosis, and that's basically a diagnosis of we know what's going on, in all honesty. And that was because there wasn't a lot of science and there wasn't a lot of information out there about what autism was. And as soon as I turned 5, my diagnosis really became autism. And that's kind of when the label that was put on me really made sense. The symptoms that I was experiencing, or the how my autism was displayed, really coincided with what autism can truly mean for some people. And you would think that the biggest worry that I think parents and educators have is that when there's a condition that a child may have that there's not a lot of information about, it could be a very difficult situation for the child if the teachers or the people involved in their life aren't really sure. You know, we don't want another Willowbrook on our hands or a real tragedy or whatever it may be. And so I was expecting that my educational beginnings would be a bit turbulent because of the fact that, you know, there's a lot of information about autism. Believe it or not, it wasn't turbulent whatsoever at the beginning at all. I've had some of the best teachers in elementary school, kind, caring teachers that care and devote their life to civil service and the means of education and helping children. And although I definitely gave a bit of some grief and whatnot, it allowed me to begin to feel comfortable in my childhood for that period of time. There was a few years where I was able to feel this sense of bliss. And things were definitely still not perfect. There were some meltdowns I would have. There would be some things that would occur that, you know, some of the non-joys that happen within autism. It was a relatively stable and successful period. And Mary, just going back on what you said with the quote that I came up with, it's absolutely true. I 100% believe in public schools and public education because, you know, and there was a time where I wasn't sure if I really truly did, and I'm sure we can get into that a little bit later. But really, the big thing that really solidified my belief in public schools and public education was seeing and reflecting on the wonderful, engaging, inspiring, and passionate teachers I had back in elementary school. And at that time, you're in such of a place of innocence. And the kids that you're around with, there was this famous story. There was a young white and African American child. They were best friends, and they wanted to haircuts, and they said the teacher won't notice us. You know what I'm saying? So it's like one of those things where they won't be able to tell the difference. Children at that age are so precious, and what we do and how we teach at that young age will help them become developed and will help develop their values, their moral systems, their everything. So that's one reason why I really believe in public schools and education on the elementary level. And then, of course, you know, I believe on that in the middle, high school, college, post-college level as well. But I think that would be for another time. But honestly, I would have to say overall, my early beginnings were pretty good in a sense.
And I think that as an educator that, you know, spends their years teaching students pre-KK 1 through maybe grade 5, those words are going to be so meaningful, Aidan. Everything that you shared with our audience as far as what you now know about autism, perhaps then obviously that was something that you were unaware of. But when you look back, just the sheer treatment, being loved and respected and cared about meant the world to you. It's very evident. So I think that's a huge shout out to the individuals, especially our own Ms. Chesbro, that is one of our board members who was also involved early on in your education, it's important for you to really call all of those individuals out. And we are grateful for that. As an educator, that means so much, but we can always certainly learn more and know more. So your brother got into the GT program at your school. And that was a little bit of a turning point for you. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
So there were some areas that I've had weak areas within fine motor skills, certain processing or whatever. But at a young age, I did know that there were some things that I was a bit more advanced in. And I felt as though I wanted to be challenged a little bit more. To me, it wasn't about, oh, I'm in the cool program or whatever. It really was, I had ideas, I had differences. And I every year, I felt so bad because I'm sure I was a pain in Miss Chesbro's behind. But what I will say is that I always wanted to be in the GT program. And so I would do everything I could to apply each year, I know this isn't under her control, but unfortunately, access to the GT program requires testing, a certain testing quotient, and standardized testing and that type of thing. And I don't do well on them because of the fact that I've gotten better at them now, and that's a reason why I've been able to get to Kane or whatever. But the issue is that the standardized testing and whatnot, there's time limits, there's certain things that I think for a young child even is going to be stressful. And I think it's rather almost an outlier to do incredibly well for anyone. And rightly so, who did do well in those tests, great for them. But one thing, and I'm very passionate about this, and in my experience as an educational consultant and advocate, the requirements or the eligibility requirements to get into a GD program should not be relegated just towards those types of test scores. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of types of different forms of intelligence. I do not believe any one person is dumb or stupid. The choices they make may appear to be rather unintelligent, but I believe that if you're, let's say, not smart academically, what if you're smart musically? That to me is that to me is like a GT approach, having a music approach or having a physical science approach, garnering a particular interest. If a child has a prowess in and really fulfilling that potential, I think is going to be the key in unlocking our next layers of education. And that's something that we've really been resistant to because we're stuck to this old idea of we only have to have the kids that are really good, just overall a versatile bunch of kids. And unfortunately, some school districts, and this has been litigated against before, and it will be again because special needs children have been denied those types of access because of the testing, and that to me is unconscionable, and they should have the ability to. It's called accommodating or their disability, but they don't want to because it's about the ease. It's about making it the people that are, according to education standards as of now, the people that really are just well-rounded, above average in multiple areas. And that to me isn't realistic, but good for them. I think that they're incredible. But one thing I want to add on to that was I always had that belief, but when I was younger, obviously I didn't, really fully understand the education policy or issues and whatnot. But all I wanted to do was be in that program to just learn a little bit more and to kind of maybe tune in my interests like some of the other kids would do. And my brother, who is the absolute love of my life, I love my brother. We were twins, and he's a very, very, very smart guy. But academically, I'm not saying I've always had a bit more of a drive. He's done exceptionally well academically, as shown. But I've always been wanting to be on the extra step. And my brother was excited about the GT program, but this hasn't been like a journey that he's been pushing for years and years and years. For me, that was me. I was the kid in first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth who wanted. And that's, 7 to 8 years. And I never had that chance. I was never able to get into that program. And that hurt me. That hurt. But I knew ultimately, I later found out for me that there would be other opportunities. If this was an opportunity I wasn't able to access after 7 years, it happens and it's okay. And I found other opportunities later on in my life that I think has either replaced or attempted to replace in a successful way that GD program that I was missing.
So, Aidan, I want to point out something that is very clear to me, and I'm sure it will be to our audience. Your advocacy is shining through in the words that you just expressed. And I think that here in New Jersey, the recent passage of our gifted education law back in January of this year, one of the things that obviously is part of the law has to do with equity and making sure that we're addressing underrepresented groups as well. And this is what you speak about and so passionately just talked about in your own experiences as well. And I think that your voice and your story is something for all of us to hear. And so again, you're advocating for something that you personally believe in, and you're doing that today, and you will be talking about that in just a little bit. But as we progress through your years in school, it was clear that as you were developing in elementary school, you knew, and I know that you spoke earlier to me about different projects that you worked on that you were passionate about, your president's project and how much that meant to you. And there were different ways that you were able to express exactly what your talent was, what your gift was. But in addition to that, you were developing as a kid as well. And along the way, you were watching your brother. You were watching him in this program. You were wanting to be in this program, but you yourself were growing up. And as we move into the middle school years, you describe them as an especially turbulent time. And whether you're an educator or a parent or someone that is just an advocate of kids in general, these years are notoriously some of the toughest ones that we can walk through. And I know that, some of the things that you're about to share with us now certainly will certainly describe the turbulence for yourself. So can you talk a little bit about the transition from those elementary years, Aidan, into middle school years and what that was like for you? And this is kind of where gym class comes into play.
Right, what you kind of mentioned at the beginning, yes, and thank you for reminding me that. So it's really, when you reach kind of the fifth grade level, some schools have all in the elementary school, K through 5 or P through 5. Other schools, it'll be K through 4 or P to 4. For me, the middle school had the fifth. And so that I would go into a different building. And it wasn't really mean a bad thing or at all. A lot of times people with autism have issues with transitions, transitional phrases of moving from one dominant thing that you've been doing for a while to another. But for me, change can sometimes be hard, but I think and this has always been with me, change might be a little bit harder for me than, let's say, a neurotypical person, but with a clear understanding, a pathway, and steps to ensure that I'm comfortable, I'm really able to meet that. And I have that approach going in, I think, to Valley View, which was the middle school that I went to. And the fifth grade really started off pretty good. Fifth and sixth grade started off really good because I was very fortunate enough to have teachers that are some of the greatest teachers that you'll ever meet. And that's going back against my message of I believe in public schools. There's a lot of issues with public schools, and I can't tell you the tactics that they do. As something as a consultant, some of the legal things that they will do, and some of the things that they do or won't do, it's downright unconscionable and disgraceful. But what I will say is that 9 times out of 10, public schools are really trying to do the right thing. There are some that aren't, and that's when I get involved. But they're trying to do the right thing. And at the beginning, I really felt as though my middle school was trying to do the right thing. So for me, I always had, like I mentioned a little bit a while ago, I've always had some issues with like motor skills, coordination, those types of things that sometimes make it hard to do physical activities like throwing, catching a ball, using like your hands, your motions, that type of thing. And I would go into gym class. And there's a term for gym class that's also called PE, which stands for physical education. And I think that there's almost this idea that the the education part of it has kind of gone away, and it's really just you're playing, and that's not always true. But for a guy that really had some issues with basic types of things that other kids were able to meet or exceed, that was really hard for me to deal with. And I didn't really have that opportunity to really be taught or to go through it. Sure, I had OT, but they didn't really have a lot of occupational therapy back in middle school. That would really only be for like really significant cases, and I wasn't necessarily a significant case. So they tried to work with me, I think, a little bit in the gym class. And it was fine at first, things were, but as you get older, sometimes the curriculum grows demanding, right? From the curriculum in fourth grade is going to be more demanding curriculum in first grade. And curriculum grew older, the physical requirements as well as the nature of what would be expected for you not only became incredibly hard for me, but again, this was during a time where people were really scared. This was right during the 2008, 2009, during President Obama's first term as president, and Michelle Obama. There's this growing trend of curbing obesity, really raising physical fitness, athleticism, and I think I applaud that 1,000%. But the problem was that sometimes schools are pressured to meet certain demands or needs or whatever, and so they really strive their students to meet certain quotas. And I knew I wasn't going to meet that quota. And it's not because, academically, if there was an academic test that you could give me, I probably could, because I like to think of myself as academically gifted. But I know physically, I have people with autism. A common thing is just that they have I lost the stone. And so a lot of other things. And it became hard for me. And the reason why it became hard for me was because of the fact that the demands that they had, there's what's called a PACER fitness-gram test. I'm not sure if Mary, you're familiar with that, or if, I'm sure maybe other educators that will watch this are familiar with that. I've looked at this in the most non-biased way possible, because I really am about evaluating policy and what would be good for kids. And I've looked at this every way possible, and it's still it's the epitome, really, of our education system as a whole, but more so concentrated on the physical education area. It's basically a test where you are to run as much as you can, and the timer gets faster and faster and faster, where you have to rely on the a few kids have died from that, actually, in a few schools. This has been over the years. It's supposed to test stamina, test running abilities. Some kids have had heart attacks. There's very, very, very few, though. And mind you that it is very, very rare when that happens. But I'll never forget it. I thought, I threw up, by the way, when I did it twice, because they made me do it. But I'll never forget, there was a child that had autism that was in my class who had a 1-to-1 I didn't have a 1-to-1 This was a child that was much more impacted with autism. And they made this kid run like a maniac. And it broke my soul seeing how much pain physically and possibly even emotionally this kid was in from having to do this running. I'm all about athleticism. I'm all about ensuring that a child is healthy and safe. But this standard way where one size meets all has been the epitome of our education system for far too long. And not only does that exist in the academic world in education, it's sad, but it's true that exists really in the physical education arena. And so while I was having difficulties mastering the skills, I was also having difficulty interacting with kids there. I mean, they knew that I was a little bit off. I was a little bit different in the way I acted, the way I kind of, interacted with people and whatnot. But they made fun of me a lot for not being able to do this, not being able to do well on a particular game that we may be playing, like football, this or that. And what's funny is that that particular class, I think it really is true that kids need to be motivated. Children need to be motivated in order to. There has to be an incentive within education. That's why I'm all for school stores. I'm all for incentivizing kids and whatnot, because that will propel the ability to learn, which is one of the goals. I won't spend too much more time talking about this, but it's really important because I really want to just mention this one thing. I think that if you're interested in a particular subject, so I was always interested in history, and I kid you not, I don't know how I did it, but I literally, in one marking period that I had in my middle school, I just had a 100. Like I just literally, I guess I just had a really great marking period. I did, I had a 100, and that's never really been reached before. But every single time I had a test in physical education, whether it be physical and whether it actually be intellectual, whether it be, draw a diagram of the football field, whether 50s, 40s, 60s, 70s, lukewarm grades, that was unconscionable to me. And I think that it's really an interest, finding the interest, or there are some things that you'll always have to know or that everybody's going to have to learn. But as an educator, it's hard to do, and we're asking a lot. And that's why we got to, first of all, we need to raise the wages for teachers. That I can tell you. But we're already asking a lot from teachers, and then to say a step forward, hey, get to know your students and try to tailor the curriculum to each student. There's not enough time in the day. There's not enough hours or the resources, which is why I advocate for smaller school sizes, but that's a whole nother story. The point is that the few teachers that are out there, and a lot of people that are watching this, I really do believe have this passion as well. The ability to individualize, incentivize, and to motivate students in education is something incredibly powerful. And take it from me, my story was very hard, and class was, and I could give you so many examples of things that were really painful, but I remember being that odd kid out. And if you're a physical education teacher that's watching this, I would really, really, really implore you to invite yourself to look at how other kids may perceive gym class, or ways where if everybody's going to have to do gym, what are some things you do to individualize or tailor the curriculum so that a kid isn't going to gym class every day and feeling like they're in prison. That's with every single class, but for me, gym class is the most traumatic, which is why I mentioned it. So that was really my gym class experience really in middle school.
Aidan, I know that sharing this kind of information that is geared towards one particular class, and again, I know in our pre-interview work that gym class in middle school as well as high school was a very trying time for you. And I think that what you're really trying to convey to our audience from your perspective is that really, as you just said, getting to know each of your students and exactly what their needs are can work, wonders and make an amazing impact on a child. And I think that again, you're speaking to all of us. It's not that we have to be phys ed teachers, but for everyone, as you talked about with your elementary school teachers on up, it was just noticing you and noticing exactly who you were. Before we get,
I just wanted to quickly say, Mary, if that's okay, no matter how broken a district may be, or no matter how much disinterest or pain a child may be in, that one teacher, just one teacher can be the person that will inspire them to move forward. You have the opportunity out there to be that one teacher that could change that child's life. And I can tell you, I remember Elaine Chesbro, who's the board member, apparently, she changed my life. There were like 3-4 other teachers that propelled me to get to this point. Being that person or motivating to be that teacher or the person that at least touches or reaches an impact on a student. It doesn't have to be everybody. Just even one student is really what's something that should, I think, really keep you going. I just wanted to say that.
Aidan, it's really the only thing that can and should be repeated over and over again. We don't realize exactly what we can do for students until it actually happens. And thank you for reminding us from your perspective, from your experiences, and how different individuals propelled you to where you are today. And that's not to take away from the things that you did as an individual, how you grew through all of the adversity, through all of the things. And we haven't even talked about Judge Judy and what that meant, but that was a little bit of a part of your story as well. If I'm not mistaken, Judge Judy was something that you would actually watch. Talk a little bit about that before we get to where you are today.
Yeah. So just a little bit kind of in middle school, besides gym class, things were also getting really hard for me in the 7th and 8th grade period because I was being bullied in a really challenging way. There were a lot of rumors surrounding me that I was gay. It is true, but at that time I was very nervous. I live in a very, well, you can draw your own conclusions about it, but we'll say conservative area where sometimes it's challenging to look into diversity and inclusion. And I had one of the greatest art teachers, and bless her, she just recently retired, and she was the greatest. That was a class where I was able to relax. And so I knew if I'm going into the lunchroom, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a battle because I'm going to hear the F word under some kids' breaths. I'm going to have a hard time sitting somewhere because they'll give me this whole rundown of, oh, somebody's coming or can't, this is broken, this and that. I'm just going to get this whole big rigmarole, and it wasn't fun for me. And plus, being an autistic kid as well, sometimes things are really too stimulating. It's a small school, but even a lot of people can be a bit too stimulating. So what I would do is I would watch Judge Judy on my computer during my breaks. Judge Hatchett, that's another good one. Judge Mathis, but Judge Judy really was the big one because I've always been interested in law. I've always been interested in law and education, even since I was a young child, and that's partly because my mother is in education, and she is the love of my life, and she is truly one of the greatest educators you could ever meet. But what I will say is that having Judge Judy as a salvation, and I wrote to the show, maybe I'll one day get a reply back, but really having that person just kind of give me a break and look at the people that made my life challenging were the younger brothers and sisters that were on Judge Judy's program, that were getting reamed for doing the wrong thing almost. I'm not saying that every person on her program were people that were repulsive or reprehensible, but the few that were finally getting chewed at, it felt good, cathartic to watch because I knew this is still a very prevalent problem, and I saw this in high school. I knew that the kids that were really making my life challenging, they're not going to get chewed out, or you'll go through the motions of, like, let's say an HIV investigation, or you'll say, what happened, what's this, what's that. But there's never this lasting impact, I think. It could be, but there's never this, like a screaming, barking dog right in your face, explaining to them, don't ever do that again. There's almost this, you just go through it. And so to see some people, that were acting in an irresponsible way, really being called out on it, it felt good. And I've watched it ever since, obviously, and unfortunately, her program is ending a little bit in 2021. But the salvation for me is that she's moving to Amazon for another program, which she's been tight-lipped about. So hopefully, if my day is particularly stressful or aggravating or whatever have you, I'll be able to go on Amazon and watch her program. But really, I think that that kind of mentality that I had definitely really carried to high school. If we could talk about that, or if you want to address something else, Mary.
I love your passion for Judge Judy, and we just have to make sure that we share this with her so that she knows how much she affected your life as well, just by watching. Aidan, what we want to do actually is to kind of round out our interview tonight. We want to talk a little bit about what it is that you're doing right now. I know that there are other things that you could speak about when it comes to your educational career, the individuals that remain steadfast in your mind because of what they've done for you, and the experiences that help to shape you, even the very hardest ones. One of the quotes that you had said to me was, "What happened to me ignited my passion." And I think that the young man that you are today, those of us that are listening to your story, no matter who you are, we are all feeling some sort of way right now.
I hope so.
Yep,
Never know.
Well, we definitely are. And I will tell you that to look at the list of things that you are involved with right now, that's one of the next things that I want to share with the audience, and you can talk about that as well. You are, again, an educational law advocate. You work with kids, in your words, in order to make sure that they feel good about themselves, working on executive functioning skills, staying organized, doing well in school. You also work at a local psychiatric hospital. You are the author of a book called This is Autism, currently available on Amazon. You are also currently working on a realistic fiction book that is loosely based on the things that happened to you, both in middle school and high school. You are creating a manual that you are hoping to, I guess, eventually publish, Advocacy 101 for parents in schools. And finally, I mentioned earlier, you are also a student at Kane University. Aidan, you are, again, I said it in the opening, you are inspiring and remarkable. Just give us a little bit about, you're welcome, about some of the things, that you're doing right now. This is incredible.
Yeah. Well, to first just quickly start off of, you kind of mentioned at the very beginning, what happened to me. That's kind of the reason why I do this. I don't want this to happen to anybody else. A few months ago, I met my now business partner, Jessica Likewise, who is a CEO of another educational advocacy business. And she said, she and I came up with, what if we were to create an anthology series of autistic adults sharing their painful experiences? And so I won't get into it right now because it's hard. It's hard to talk about, but I was able to articulate some of the really challenging and traumatic things that happened to me really in high school, but I write about it in my book as well as kind of my take on several um, issues that I've had and kind of what it's like to live with autism. In my book, it's called This is Autism, and you can find that on Amazon. And it's really, I'm really happy about it because it's gotten a lot of positive reception, because the stories that you hear from others and the individuals that share their strengths, their areas that need some improvement, their opportunities, their potential, it's very inspiring. And I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to collaborate on that book. But for me, long story short, I was able to graduate high school a bit early in November of 2019 because I transitioned to an alternative school. And I was very angry at that time. I was still bitter. And I don't believe in revenge. It's something my mother taught me, and it's something that I don't have that value. But part of me was like, what can I do to really get them? What can I do to really, let them know I'm in pain? You really messed me up. For some people, unfortunately, there's been some terrible and tragic choices that kids have made if a school really does the wrong thing. And not to be dark or whatever, but we've seen situations where there's been acts of violence, acts of anger. And obviously, I wouldn't engage in that, but I was angry. And the not type of good anger, the anger that would only, drive pain. There's an anger that can be instilled in one that drives change or the want to change a particular issue. And so I figured I know a lot about the law, and I also know a lot about education. I want to do something. So it started off as a movement. I began, keep speaking with at my local coffee shops, speaking with parents, teachers, kids themselves about some of the issues that they face within the special needs community. And then, we did, some events, like we would do autism awareness events. We would go to the school board and try to collaborate. We've done all sorts of things. And it became increasingly more. And I said to myself, where I'm able to perhaps help a bit more directly, I wanted to do more. And so when I was 16 years old, I just turned 19 now. I had a nonprofit where I began to just kind of work on spreading that message. But once I really graduated high school, there was a lot of time that I had on my hands. It wasn't going to be until college. I did take some college classes on the computer, but I wanted to create a business, actually. And I believe in the spirit of charity. I believe in the civil service. So this idea of my business wasn't going to be something where I'm making out with the bank or whatever. This was really just something where I could make a healthy, relatively financially solvent income, but the most of it would really be helping people. And so what I did was I read like a maniac, and I read everything I could to know about New Jersey's special education law and advocacy. At my office, I got a whole bookshelf of everything that there is to know about it. I've read and I've studied, and I've been doing this for a while now. And basically, I'm the guy that comes in when a child's IEP, or when a child's 504, or when a child's entire educational programming isn't working. I've had some diverse cases. I once represented an Italian soccer team who was disabled, like a Paralympics, and they couldn't get home because they were facing some discrimination and with flying. I've had some unique cases like that, but most of my work is really devoted towards children, whether it be a kindergartner or fifth grader or a high school student, that are really having a hard time in their school. And so I review their case. I review their records, their IEPs. I suggest ways to improve. I might meet with school districts. I might consult, whatever it may be. But this type of work and the law, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to, at times, and I hate to say this, and I still mean what I say, but I actually believe in public schools. Some of the stories that I've heard are just so tragic. And some of the things that the schools will do, and I think some teachers may even feel this way or have noticed this before, or have sadly have been caught in the crossfires. Some of the things that public schools will do is manipulative and immoral when it comes towards special needs students. And that's especially seen with some IEPs, which stands for Individualized Educational Plans, basically a framework of what accommodations or what things can my child receive due to their disability, because it impacts it impedes their ability to learn. And schools will sometimes be lazy. They sometimes won't follow it. Sometimes it's out of convenience. Sometimes it's out of negligence, or sometimes it's really, I've had cases where it's sadly out of premeditation of, we really don't like this child. And it's rare when that happens, but it does happen. And so I'm really happy to say it's been a successful business. And if you're, I work with teachers as well. If you're ever a teacher out there that isn't sure, how to best approach a situation, or, I have a challenging student or whatever, you can always visit my website and give me a call, send me an email, whatever it may be. I'm not saying I know the world. I really don't. I'm still in college right now. I really am not the guy that knows every answer. But there's some things that I do know, and that's some things that I've seen within the educational world. And I've been successful with that, with cases that I've had to go to court or had to be settled. And so I've written to answer your question, Mary. I've been working on that book. I've been running my business, which I still do. I'm at Kane University right now. I'm studying history, teachers of students with disability, K through 12, and pre-law. My goal would eventually be to earn my graduate degree in psychology, to do therapy, and to obviously be a lawyer. And it's unrealistic. People will often say, hey, it's unrealistic. That's a lot. I think I have time. Stretch it out or find little things to do. But that's kind of my academic career right now. And for the future, I'm going to work on a realistic fiction book that I've been working on. It's partly based on my life, but it's very diverse. It talks about the LGBT community. It talks about the autistic community. It talks about high school experience. And I don't want to give too much away because I'm still really tinkering with it, but I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a good time. And I think it would be interesting, and hopefully it could resonate with some people. And finally, I did just want to mention that I am working on a manual. So parents sometimes do not know their rights. Sometimes school districts, sadly, will take advantage of parents and will say if they don't agree with the evaluation that they have to pay for it, the parents have to pay for it. That's not necessarily true at all. But I wanted to create a manual or a book highlighting in plain English, no games, no mincing words, what are your rights, or how do you approach, or what are the rights overall and responsibilities for both school districts, for both parents, and for both educators, so that it can be finally really clear cut, and so that more people have access to this invaluable information that I'm garnering from other sources, from personal experiences. And I'm hoping that it's going to be something that perhaps help parents in the future in the state of New Jersey, and also really parents and educators and case managers federally, because the principles that I would exhibit in this manual are really federal principles that really kind of come through each time. So I think I'm definitely busy at this point. I also work at a psychiatric hospital. I've seen some really unfortunate things happen there. Some people that are very in need, and some of the stories you really wouldn't believe. But I'm on a mission. I'm really on a mission to do the best that I can to ensure that other people aren't in the same untenable position that I was. And I talk about it in my book, This is Autism. And I'm on a mission to also learn. I want to learn. I am wrong a lot of the time. Sometimes I am right, but I am wrong a lot of the times. And I want to learn as much as I can so that I have a better understanding of the world, the great, beautiful world that's in front of me. So that's kind of what I've been up to right now, to really summarize it.
Aidan, there is no question that I know myself, and I'm sure those individuals that are listening right now are truly inspired by the things that you are doing today. I am sure that we will be providing contact information for you as well, because I have to believe that people will want to reach out to you just to let you know what a remarkable and inspiring person you are. And as we close out this final part of Stories That Connect Us, In a couple of words, Aidan, what part of your story that you've shared tonight do you want people to take with them as we close out this interview after listening to you? What part of it would you like them to remember you by?
Passion and hope. Be passionate with what you do. I think that that's really important. Finding what really drives you in this world, whether it be, be working in construction or in government or in law or education or medicine. Finding that thing that you're passionate about will allow you to make a difference for the community around you, as well as make a difference for yourself. Solidify your strengths, solidify your wants within the world of what you want to do. Passion is what drives you, and hope. Hope for me hasn't always been so easy to obtain. But what I will say is that when I have that moment of hope where I say, I believe or I hope that I can get to this point, when it's finally been achieved, it feels as though hope is this magic drinking water that you wish you could have every single day. And unfortunately, it isn't always so accessible. I want people to know out there that there is hope for. It has not been an easy journey for me, and it still isn't. But having hope, a way to go on, and as a way to carry yourself forward a little bit more so within the world, is what drives people, what drives men, women, and others to great success. Hope is what the what propels the wheels of a car and the heartstrings of a heart. And I just think it's so important that it's so hard sometimes to find hope, but if you look really deep in your soul and you have a belief that you really can make a change or that things can get better for you, many times that hope does come true. Those would be the final things I'd say.
Passion and hope. Aidan Allman Cooper, thank you so very much for being with us tonight on Stories That Connect Us with NJGC. We are so grateful that you took the time to be with us. Thank you, Aidan, so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.